Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, hi.
Hi.
We are in the
Snigdha's in
foothills of the Himalayas, are we?
Yes, very much.
where is this?
Dehradun.
Oh, how nice. I wish I
I've been here
wasn't
for
there.
here.
Yeah.
Now it's closing to about 2 months.
Oh, I see. Two months you've been in Dehradun. Okay. Okay.
By the end of this month, it will be about 2 months.
Okay. So this is just a
I'd
holiday
come.
or a retreat or what? Or a something like that?
Retreat is our. Huh?
Holiday or a retreat of sorts?
No. I decided to come for Diwali,
Huh.
and the original plan was to work for a week from here, and then, I mean, my family stays here,
Oh, I see.
so yeah. So the idea was that I'll work 1 week, take 1 week off, be with everyone for Diwali, and then head back. And then, of course, that turned into acha chalo ek aur hafta reh lete hain. And then everybody was like, what's the point of going back, because you're working from home and it seems to work fine here from
Yeah.
here as well.
Huh.
And I also thought ki it makes sense. So then decided to stay back till the end of the year and go back. Jan 3rd is when I'm going back.
Okay, okay. How
That's why you
nice.
see me
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
curled up with
yeah.
4 layers of clothes.
Yeah. So somebody else is looking after the cafe, is it? Or the cafes are not
No, the cafes are in Bangalore. I stay in Mumbai. So the cafes are
Oh,
being looked after by my other two partners
I
who stay
see.
in Bangalore. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Hi, Dilip. I'm Snigdha. We are meeting for the first time.
Yes. I was just listening to you saying that you were in Dehradun. I mean, do you go there often?
Well, definitely once in a year. This is where my family is. Both my sisters and live here. So yes,
Okay.
at least once in a year.
I have a very, very dear friend, and she's all alone in Dehradun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where does she?
I don't know where. I don't know Dehradun at all. Suniti is the
Okay.
name. Suniti
Okay.
Salam.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure there is a civil lines or a mall road or an MG road in Dehradun. कुछ तो होगा
None.
ऐसा.
नहीं, छोटा शहर है इसलिए ना सिविल लाइंस है ना
नहीं है. MG road भी नहीं
रोड
है.
है और मॉल रोड इज ऑलवेज हिल स्टेशंस एंड दिस इज अ वैली नो देहरादून इज अ वैली
कानपुर में भी एक मॉल रोड है. That's why I was wondering if it's quite a universal thing.
कानपुर से छोटा शहर है ओके हाउ
Hello.
Roop, how have you been?
Let me start with today. I think it's been actually quite a interesting time of a lot of socialization after a very long time. So I threw a party at my house. I called over people. I went to a auction shop today, an auctioneer, saw some very nice, lovely furniture. I have no space anywhere, but I was still quite evoked by the stuff I saw. I had lots of interesting conversations. So yeah, overall feeling very full.
Nice. So are we having others also join in today?
Sharbani, did any of the others get back?
No, none of them. I have sent a mail to each and everybody, direct mail.
Okay.
Hi,
Yeah,
Shubhani.
Hello, good
Vineet says
evening.
he won't be able to join. Yeah.
Okay.
I was looking forward to seeing him again.
Yeah, he has a wedding to attend. So
Can we start?
Sure, let's start.
Roop, I've made you the host, so I'll make a
Okay.
move.
Okay. You're
See you,
exiting again.
everyone.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.
thanks,
See you,
everybody.
everyone. Bye.
Hmm.
तो बिल्ली के गले में कौन घंटी बांधेगा आज? By the way, what did we decide? Are we doing any themes, or are we, sort of
It's
going
completely
with?
up to us. If somebody has a theme in mind, we can work on that.
Okay.
I think if the last conversation that we kind of had, sorry, there were a number of themes that emerged. One was about, one was about, is depression really about depressed people, or uh, people who are, is it a community issue, so friends, colleagues, relatives, spouses, etc., etc. And one of the things that I was left with last time was, somebody talked about, one of my colleagues is going through depression and reacts in very unpredictable ways, and I don't know how to deal with it, and therefore I withdraw. And one of the questions that I was left with is depression about the person who's suffering from depression, or do you even see how helpless you feel or I feel when I'm, when one of my friends, relatives, or colleagues is suffering from depression. So that was one. But also, that conversation led us to talk about, um, what happens in an organizational space, in a professional space. How do organizations deal with it, and what are some of the struggles therein? The third thing that came up was, um, how various kinds of experiences, particularly of alienation, isolation, stigma, leads to depression. So how depression can be stigmatizing for people, but also how stigmatizing actually leads to depression. That was the other theme that came up. Um, yeah. So we talked about, social standards and judgments around body and ugliness and prettiness, or sexuality leads to people therefore being alienated, isolated, etc. The other very interesting thing that came up last time, and it did leave me thinking quite a bit, was, one talks about depression, one talks about coping. How do I cope with depression? But I think Dilip raised a very important point, that I've learned to cope with depression. I've done pretty well in life, but there is a certain resolution that I'm seeking, and what is the nature of the resolution that I'm seeking? So is coping really the, when Ahmed says the depression is the uninvited guest, then do we necessarily just learn to cope with that uninvited guest, or is there a certain um, resolution, a recalibration one is looking at in terms of, you know uh, engaging with that uninvited guest? So these are some of the themes that had emerged from last time. Ahmed, anything else? Dalip?
Yeah, I'm as you were saying, I was also reflecting. Um, we also kind of began by asking, each other, does any kind of image or metaphor come to your mind about depression? And some of us spoke about a kind of a very oppressive darkness. Um, then I think Uma also mentioned kind of the image of stillness, and then we kind of explored some other images. I mean, how there can be different images of depression. One being kind of this very still, uh, um, still perhaps immobilized, lethargic kind of image of depression, and the other could be the other also is not could be is one of sort of movement of a kind of a moving anger and rage underneath, or even overt. I mean, need not be covert, but anger and rage coming through, you know uh, so that's the other thing I kind of remember. um,
Yeah, one of the images I remember was of uh, uh, a cloud which is dark, which promises rain, but it never rains.
yeah,
Uh, and
yeah,
the contrast to that was an overwhelming wave,
yeah,
a huge wave with a huge velocity, as it were.
yeah.
And that was the other image that emerged.
Mm.
So, Emma, you talked about how the uh, the sad face of depression. It may evoke sympathy or even understanding amongst others, but how the angry face of depression,
Yeah,
the one
yeah,
in
yeah,
rage, finds very little empathy and
Mm.
understanding.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And it's so interesting that you say that because when you were talking about images, um, I think the I've always uh, I've always experienced very lot of anger when I've been in states when I felt depressed or sad. And my anger always, I mean, the kind of fantasy that starts building up in my head is that of, violence, like really doing violence unto others. And 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 I've when I've like been irritable or annoyed, or like I'm sort of like this little live wire that's sort of discharging. I've felt so even more angry when people have said, I mean, what's that angry about? Why are you angry about it? Um, and I find it very difficult to explain to people that that's also an expression of my sadness, that can you look beyond, not to everyone, but, perhaps to my loved ones or to people who I think um, I trust or I feel are very close to me. When they've asked that question, it is really, grated on my nerves. Um, I think for most people also, I guess it's difficult to understand कि इसमें गुस्सा होने वाली बात क्या है. अगर upset हो तो रो लो. I mean, not as practically or transactionally as I'm saying it, but like if you're sad, how can you be angry? It's difficult for people to sort of see that the anger is also an expression of your sadness. Um, and I found it very hard to explain to people where that anger is really coming from. When I even now I can probably articulate it as this is it's the unfairness or the injustice or envy. You can give it whatever name I'm angry because I'm envious or jealous of things that others have, but I don't have in my life or whatever. But ultimately, actually, I also struggle to understand why is my expression of sadness always in the form of anger, or more often than not, in the form of anger.
You you mentioned violence. Uh, how do you deal with that? And how does it express itself in you?
Actually, I don't deal with the violence at all. I mean, I don't, because I don't act out on my violence. I don't go and beat up people or scream and shout at others. The way that it actually manifests itself is in, certain fantasized violence towards some people or somebody. Um, and it just remains more like an important rage than and then, the next day or the day after or whatever, after a certain period of time, I'll because I also find it very tiring to be angry for too long because I find it's such a I mean I'm also a very pragmatic person, so even the discharge of that sort of energy I feel बहुत हो गया यार, अब मैं कुछ और कुछ और करती हूँ. I think that's how I deal with it, but I don't act on it. um yeah.
Snigdha, your voice is breaking intermittently. I wonder if you put yourself on hotspot, do you think the connection will be better?
No, it just if I put myself off video, will that be helpful?
No, it's clear now.
We want to see your face.
Yes.
Yeah, no, every now and then that does happen. I'm sorry. I mean, even if I put myself on hotspot, na, वो
It's
बीच बीच
still
में थोड़ा सा interruptions होगा. Um, Sorry about that.
sorry to cut you off.
No.
So I think the way I've experienced rage, and I make a distinction over here between rage and anger. And so for me, anger is an emotion that I might experience. Sorry, 1 second. Huh? Anger is an emotion that I experience from time to time in relation to something that may have happened. Uh, for me, rage is a psychosocial state, where as a pattern it plays out, where there is an essential disconnect between me and other people and the context I'm in. Uh, so, to give you an example, let's say that um, uh, I am in rage when I find myself disconnected from other people, be it colleagues or friends or family. Um, and the nature of the disconnect is essentially that I feel others have no clue what's happening in me. Yeah. And they may not even uh, I feel, and that may not necessarily be true, that they're not even necessarily curious about what is happening in me. So, one of the things I've noticed, for example, is when I find that in various spaces, in my primary system, in my workspace, people are engaging with me because they want something from me, right? I play a particular role, or I play a resource, I bring in my skills or competencies, etc., etc. But but no one is interested in terms of how I am or what is happening in me internally. Correspondingly, I'm also aware that I am also unable to express myself or let other people in uh, to bring them in or to give the access to that. Snigdha and I have shared other spaces, working spaces, and she will know one of my symptoms or in when I'm in that kind of a state is often when I ramble, when I'm saying something which may not be very cogent, which may not make sense, and I'm really asking for help in a sense, saying that, hey, the leap, this is I may be speaking for 10 minutes or 15 minutes continuously, and thoughts are very rambled and all over the place, and I find that people are saying that, hey, what are you really trying to say? We don't get you. Okay. Um, and that makes me feel very frustrated, angry, and I get into rage. Now, that may not necessarily express as anger. It may express as very passive forms of aggression. For instance, I just completely, my all my conversations are very transactionary. Chahiye kya bolo? What is it that you want at this point of time? To keep it cut and dry, and to be very incisive with people, to also become very insensitive to their own context, to be very impatient, etc. I think I find spaces, uh, you know, more and more, there's very little space for vulnerability of this kind. You know, it's. I find people are far more accepting or able to accept when if I were to express my vulnerability, saying that, this is what is making me sad. I'm feeling very hurt, etc. People are still more accepting of it. But one of the forms in which this rage comes out, overtly or in insidious ways, there is an accusation. There is an accusation at other people, and there is an accusation at self as well. So it might express in self-flagellation. Jaise ki, I might tell you guys that, oh, this is happening to me, and I know I'm the one at fault. I'm the one who's not doing this, and I'm not the one who's doing that. Or it can be the other way around. It can be that I'm making an accusation saying that, Ahmed, you're not doing this, or Dalip, you're not doing this, or Snigdha, you're not doing this. And there's a huge judge which comes into action and into play, which makes everybody feels very, very accused. And it triggers fear, it triggers rage in other people as well. So that's one of the ways I think it expresses. Earlier on, my response was to fight or flight. So either I would go full on and fight it out, and I would say, take the bull by its horns and state it exactly for what it is, and dekha jayega jo hoga, or take flight, saying that just completely shut up, clam up, and hold the resentment within, and operate with other people only on very functional levels, very transactionary levels, and stay with the pathos ki dunya to aisa hi hai. Other people are always limited in their capabilities, and they are not capable of much more, which would further isolate and alienate me. And in a professional space, it would make all interfaces extremely dry. Yeah, and I'd come across as very intimidating to other people, um, where sometimes rage that is insidiously expressed, right, often leaves other people feeling lost and not knowing how to deal with it.
I often think that in my deepest moment of funk, what I'm calling as funk, and maybe that's true for others also. I don't think anybody can help. That place is it's meant to be lonely. I, I, I can't, I can't actually think that. I mean, you can call it an insulated space, you can call it an isolated space, whatever the words are, but um, it's meant to be unreachable in some ways, because I think that's probably when you're truest to your own self also. Um, And I've experienced that even as a therapist. There are times when just allowing people to be actually in that space for a certain period of time, whatever, and that the judgment of what's the period of time one will take, there is, of course, a question mark and a relative term. But I sometimes feel कि लोगों को रहने देना चाहिए वहाँ, छोड़ देना चाहिए थोड़ी देर के लिए उनको वहाँ. You know, what's this need of trying to bring them out of the funk? What is the need to pull people out of their blues? And just allow people to be there because it's also a restful place sometimes. I mean, I've probably felt at times a little restful there. I'm also thinking about, as we are talking about this, I'm also thinking about the associations that we all build, even from a socio-cultural perspective, in any society, in any context. Um, why is depression just only seen as a pathology and not as another state of being? You know, um, so what's this whole tamasha about being happy all the time? सबको खुश रहना चाहिए, सबको ऑप्टिमिस्टिक रहना चाहिए, होपफुल रहना चाहिए. You know, life is so beautiful. You know, and I often think that a lot of perhaps the rejection of cause in our own selves probably comes also from this, that it's wrong, to be in melancholic state. Um, so the moment somebody is, distract them, uh, do something to bring them out of it. It's an unnatural state. Bring yourself out of it, push others out of it. Um,
I can relate to that, Snigdha. I think, um, you know, one of the things over a period of time, over many years, I think one of the things I had to recalibrate is how I was socialized into believing that the purpose of life is to be happy. Yeah? The purpose of life is to build a happy family. The purpose of life is to build happy relationships. Uh, the purpose of life is to search for and create beauty, as it were. And when I resonate with the question is, when I started asking why is it so, you know is the purpose of my life to be happy and to avoid pain. So one of the points of differences that I have with many of my colleagues, especially from both psychologists as well as um, uh, you know professionals in the HR sector or whatever, is that when you kind of divide emotions into positive emotions and negative emotions, right, and the way it gets played out in common discourses is how positive emotions are seen as desirable, and negative emotions, typically anger, sadness, envy, etc., is seen as undesirable. And it took me a fair number of years to really appreciate that how some of the best insights I have gained about life, how some of my richest life experiences has actually come from so-called negative emotions or so-called negative experiences. And that was quite a game changer in terms of even defining or redefining, therefore, what is the purpose of my life? Is the purpose of my life really to avoid the quote unquote the undesirable? Or, like Ahmed said right in the first episode itself, to listen to guests both invited and uninvited. So, if I were to look at the positive emotions as the invited guests and the quote unquote the negative emotions as the uninvited guests, can I have a party with all of them and see what the drama is all about? And today, where I stand, that's my philosophy of life. I mean, even when I was talking earlier that when I throw a party, I have no clue how a party is going to turn out to be. Earlier on, a party had to be happy. There had to be celebration and joy and laughter and etc. These days, or for quite a few years now, when I throw a party, I'm quite expecting of a certain amount of scuffle, a certain hate getting played out, a certain resentment getting spelt out, if not directly, very insidiously. Um, so earlier on, in the last episode, Dalip, you made a mention of feeling alienated even amongst fraternity, whatever be the nature of that fraternity. I'd go into spaces and I'd be very disdainful in saying that, look, these people are so bitchy and they are so they're so hypocritical. ये लोग बोलते कुछ है, मीन कुछ और करते हैं. ये कौन से दोस्त है? I mean, why party if you're feeling if this is the way family feels about each other, then why have they even come together for celebration? But I've had to accept the fact that actually uh, engagement at an interpersonal level, at a group level, at a community level, in families, workspaces, is not only about the quote unquote the pleasant emotions, but also the unpleasant emotions, and they have been quite uh, they've been very they've been very generous in many ways.
I like to kind of pick up from a little, uh, a little back up in the conversation about rage. It kind of some of the bits connected with me, and sort of what connects with me is, ये जो कि rage as a psychosocial आपने बोला ना, kind of psychosocial state. That sort of I resonate with that a lot. It can kind of an inner state and an inner kind of predisposition. And in my case, I feel if I look back, it's kind of it has been a disposition to react very defensively. I find one thread is that is a kind of a rather quick. It's a kind of reactivity, a big sort of defensive reaction. One, two, kind externalization is what I've also find myself kind of doing. Rage really helped me kind of externalize all my fears, deep fears, okay, and make it about others, and take the battle out there, okay. So I don't have to then look at my deep sort of sense of insecurity. It also felt at times when I say defense, it also felt like the word that always comes to me is bulwark, okay, bulwark, which is kind of a embankment on a fortress kind of a thing, right? The mechanical kind of, yeah.
No, carry on. I'm just putting my phone on charge. Sorry, it's running out of battery.
Come back, yeah, come.
Sorry.
Yeah, so a kind of um, a sense of kind of, you know, a kind of a wall or an embankment, a wall between me and the world. Um, and obviously, the more, I mean, so long as there was this rage, I felt isolated. I felt the wall ended up isolating me even further, right? And so, Roop, what you said, kind of, you know, this thing about the people not noticing what's happening to me, and people having no sense of what is happening to me, also, and the rage doesn't seem to help that. You know, it furthers that, in my kind of experience. It kind of builds up it builds up further embankment where people don't have any sense of what is happening to you other than this rage, you know, other than this kind of uh, it makes it even further for takes you further away, or made me further away, and made it even further difficult for people to have any sense of what is happening to me in terms of, am I feeling vulnerable, I am feeling insecure, I'm feeling scared, whatever, you know. So yeah, that's what sort of, I've had a long kind of, yeah, long relation. Yeah, I feel it also has to do something to do with helplessness. The whole thing of not just knowing, you know, um, along with that, some kind of terror. I think my kind of, if I were to look at it slightly more cognitively, I would say the difference between anger and fear might be. This is just a speculation, but some sense of that sort of there is, it's anger accompanied by terror usually ends up as rage. Okay, but anger without so much of sort of, you know, insecurity or utter helplessness or evoking of utter sort of being this, you know, very small in a big world, perhaps might rest or move as anger. That's just my kind of, you know, imagery on it also.
Mm. What's going on in your mind, Dilip?
I think a lot of tangential thoughts have been generated by the sharing, and I'm trying to string the thoughts together. Uh, Wondering if I should try and do that and communicate something. And the other side, I'm thinking of just sharing what state I was in yesterday to start maybe a separate conversation. And yesterday I was in one of those tearful days, which happen from time to time, and not so rarely, but not so often either. And I mean, maybe 4 or 5 times I had just tears roll down, which I find my tears to be a very dear friend. One of the other themes we touched upon last time was the element of touch, remember? And tears are very soothing in that sense of, you know, as they roll down your cheeks, they stroke you. It's like a mother's gentle, you know. What brought on the tears was, there's so many things to it, but rage was definitely an aspect. I find currently the rage I suffer from, or I experience, not suffer, uh, is connected more with contempt, disgust. Okay, There were 3 emails also I received. This is in a group forum, my old school from 50 years ago. 3 hate messages. I mean, pure, unadulterated hate. I wasn't affected. I laughed because I'm so accustomed to that kind of response in that group. That didn't affect me. What I think got me troubled is now how do I respond to this? And violence was an aspect, you know. Now online, the only way you can express the violence is through language. So I get into that, you know. I mean, I'm literally sitting on the toilet seat and I get into this moment of rage of wanting to just lash out. Sometimes it helps with the movements, with the bowel movements, but you know. And again, the same elements, helplessness, you know, how to deal with it, what to do with it, the need to express yourself, not to be silenced, and the whole hate messages was trying to silence me. So, I mean, that was the state yesterday. Today, having sort of reflected over it at some level, I'm back to normal and I'm just drafting some sort of response. But that feeling of contempt and the violence that comes from it, of wanting to lash out, as you were saying, Snigdha, it's so intense and it's so violent that it's sometimes very frightening, you know. And no, I'm not sure if one wants to be alone and left alone in that space or should be left alone. I don't think one even needs a friend to understand, because it's so difficult to understand. I think what one needs, or what I need very often, is just the presence of another person who is not being judgmental, who's accepting. Maybe there is empathy, maybe not. You know, he doesn't or she doesn't understand what's exactly happening, but accepts that it's happening, and it's just there. Just the presence is so important, I think. I don't know if I made much sense in describing this state yesterday. But the disgust and the contempt sometimes is so powerful, and I experience that a lot, and it's very difficult to deal with, and it's usually connected with arrogance, situations where the person is exceptionally arrogant.
And my reaction is always, I don't want to even engage actually in conversation. I just want to listen of the situation.
Sorry, I just couldn't hear you.
Yeah,
Just
we
repeat
didn't
that.
catch that at all.
Yeah, no, I was saying that this when I feel that sort of rage and especially in places where find that it's coming from a space of arrogance, that I'm getting annoyed and I really angry at somebody's arrogance, somebody's condescending behavior. I don't want to even get into any verbal conversation with them. I just want to beat them up physically, like.
Oh, I'd love to, but I mean, they are at the other end of the world, you know. I'd love to.
I know.
I mean,
That's why I'm saying at this time, really pounding those people and saying, "लगाती हूँ एक कान के नीचे तो पता चला."
I mean, if they were here, I'd just take my walking stick and just lash out at them, you know. Or throw the Christian Bible at them, because a lot of them are Christians, you know. And this was the whole thing. This was the whole thing, you know. 2 days back, I posted Christmas greetings, and I used this. I reflected to World War I, where on Christmas Day, the French and the British soldiers put down their arms, and these were soldiers under command. Okay, they put down their arms and to greet each other, and then they ended up even playing football and stuff like that. It's a very famous, uh, real incident. And there was a small video on that, a 3-minute video. So I shared that with Christmas greetings, and I said 100 years ago that was how this happened, and 100 years later we are in a world where they are even dividing people within families. This whole COVID bullshit, and there were hate responses to that from Christians on Christmas Day. I mean, couldn't they wait a day longer and put in your hate messages, And that just got me. That just got me, you know? I mean, I don't understand. And I'm not even Christian.
For me, a lot of the times this kind of rage has been. I mean, there's a certain kind of like, because it's an inner state and it's a kind of a perpetual state, a psychosocial state. There's something mechanical and very deadening about it. Okay, um, and it's blocked. There's a feeling of being deadened, and कुछ हो ही नहीं रहा है except there is rage. So sometimes I have in the past I know this kind of one particular experience comes very vividly to me where uh, I was kind of wondering what do I do with this rage, and I was all by myself. Okay, I used to kind of live by myself in those days. So कुछ कोई था भी नहीं, and I didn't feel like kind of breaking utensils and smashing dishes. There was nobody else to beat. चिल्लाना वगैरह होता था कभी कभी. And then I got hold of this sort of I don't know where I found this carving knife from. I probably had it. और फिर मुझे एक very very kind of providentially, or whatever you may call it, I've also came across a kind of a block of wood which was left over from some saman vagara, things like that, not really for any other purpose. And I started carving that. I used that knife, and I started sort of hacking away at it, but in a slightly mindful way, not completely. Initially, ho sakta hai it was just kind of mindless hacking. And what I remember even now distinctly is after a few times I had done that, some sense of aliveness kind of seemed to come back. In the process of doing that, something came alive in me. I don't know what it was, and maybe that it didn't amount to anything much after that. But even for that moment, that deadening sort of rage became, for a brief moment or some moments, it became alive. There was anger there. It was alive. Okay, that's what kind of comes to me now. Because sometimes I feel rage without grief seems to have a very deadening quality. If it's just going out, if it's just flying out for good reasons.
It's also a channeling. I mean, what you are talking about is also a channeling. I'm actually the what's sort of resonating with me is a certain channeling.
How do you mean channeling?
Sublimating the rage, as they say. Sublimating the anger. Finding a creative expression to it.
I mean, I guess some people will call it that. I don't quite see it as a sublimation, but yeah, I mean, fair enough. Some may call it that. Yeah.
No, I'm actually relating it. When I'm saying channeling, I'm relating it back to a time about a decade and a half back when my father passed away. And I know the first few months after he passed away, I I was real angry, and not angry at the world, the people, the doctors. No, I think part of my rage was with God, and part of my rage was with my own self, because I felt that I had not done, enough to give him the kind of quality of life that in his last days he deserved. Um, but what I did, why I'm calling it channeling, Ahmed, is because, like you were talking about taking the carved knife to the block of wood and really
Yeah.
chipping away at it, and starting off with just probably random hacks to, finding a certain rhythm and smoothness or
Yeah.
whatever. I started, it's probably the only time in my life that I've actually written as prolifically as I have, because, and not on the laptop. I actually wrote by hand. And I wrote these series of letters to God. And I mean, the first many letters that I wrote were vitriolic, like it's almost like I was pouring my anger and my grief and my disappointment with myself and with God, completely out there. And at one point of time, after doing this for several days at a go, and sometimes for 1 or 2 or 3 hours in a day, I know what you're calling as liberating or aliveness. I felt a certain emptiness. I felt I've got this out of my
System.
system.
Yeah.
And then I put away those letters. I didn't touch those letters. I didn't read any of those letters for many months. Many. Um, um, but I think what that also did in my grief was also to allow me to forgive myself, for some imagined things that I felt I hadn't done, and some very real things that I I could have done but did not do. So that's why I was thinking of it as
Yeah.
channeling.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
As creative, it's true. I mean, there are so many people who've actually, out of their anger or out of the rage that they felt because of a certain sense of isolation, sadness, of being completely misunderstood or unheard, have actually poured it into something that's turned out to be hugely creative.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some masterpieces.
Yeah.
And I always think of Manto stories, and think that uh, he used both his stories and dealt with his angst and depression of his loss of belonging and loss of identity. Maybe that's where now I'm rambling.
Yeah. The word comes to mind. A very fancy word called anomie.
What is that word? I've never heard that. Say that again.
Anomie is this kind of sense of isolation, no possibility of belonging. Uh, things like that. Parts of it, I think, it has tones of alienation, all that, but just out of touch with either others or also the world, kind of a thing. Just wanting to get in touch with something in you which is kind of
Hmm.
something like that.
One poem that I came across on Rage several years ago. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It's by a poetess I've never heard her otherwise. Her name is Nikita Gill, and she says it's a poem called "The Truth About Monsters." The truth is this: every monster you have met or will ever meet was once a human being with a soul that was as soft as light as silk. someone stole that silk from their soul and turned them into this. So when you see a monster next, always remember this. Do not fear the thing before you. Fear the thing that created it instead. And when I look at what's this monster within me, all right, or when do I experience this monster? I think a couple of things. One, several years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, a very old friend of mine from school called me up. We have not been in touch for more than 40 years or 30 years. And he's moved on overseas since, and he just called me up randomly, and he said, "Look, I want to apologize to you because I remember having bullied you in school, and I feel ashamed about it today. So I just wanted to apologize." And I just didn't know how to respond. I felt cold. I didn't feel forgiving. I didn't even necessarily remember. I mean, I do remember being bullied in school, but I didn't remember the specifics of how I felt when he had bullied me or when somebody else had bullied me. And so I was left thinking that what really happened and how has it left me? Till I remembered another incident which was supposedly completely disconnected. So this happened almost a decade ago. I was in an organization. We were doing some research, and the research team, we were talking about looking at child abuse, and one of the researchers shared some personal experience of, and he was a young fellow, about 22, 23, where he talked about having experienced bullying in school, where he was a bystander. And I remember him making some statement about observing somebody being bullied. And he felt that if the victim doesn't have the balls to stand up for himself, then he deserves to be bullied. Yeah. And so I said, why do you think he deserves to be bullied? So he says, well, if you're a man, you got to stand up for yourself. And the way I saw it, that this guy, he was not only taking it, but he was asking for it. And I said, why do you think he was asking for it? So he said, well, clearly at that moment, he was powerless. Yeah. And I said, and how did you feel towards a person who was bullying him? So he said, well, I thought it was okay. I mean, since, he was actually provoking this other guy to stand up for himself and to man up. So I said, by your logic, in this particular table, I have more power than you. And if I were to therefore do things to you, do you think you'd be able to stand up for yourself? So he said, sure. And I asked him to do a couple of things, and I said, I asked him to sort of go with, as sort of an exercise, to go with a begging bowl to everybody else in the table and ask for something which he thought that he didn't have, right? And others did. And anyways, that went on to another trajectory. And then when I remember that incident, I just saw how the victim had morphed into becoming a vengeful oppressor when he encountered the same monster, and how he had internalized the monster. And I suddenly got in touch with that. And internally, I kept on defending. I said, what I did was right, because at that point of time, this guy needed to see what he was doing. And as somebody who's working on child abuse, as somebody who's working in the human rights sector, he needs to acknowledge, what he's doing. But I see today that one of these monsters, and I feel very, very enraged when I come across instances of abuse, and particularly when I see bystanders often justifying abuse, because I'm still able to empathize with people who are oppressors. I see the victim within. I can still sense that. But when I see bystanders who will rationalize, who will justify, who will say things like, if you can't defend yourself, then you can't blame the world for not standing up for you. And this brings a monster out of me. And at that point of time, I just lash out. I will deploy all my resources, my faculties to lash out. And at that point of time, I'm guiltless. I am, the guilt actually, or the sorrow really comes later on, after the monster has acted out and lashed out and sort of destroyed and decimated the other. And it's not only through words and action. I mean, it can be very insidious in saying, how do I, like, for example, in this particular incident, in front of that, in front of that 4 or 5 other people at the table, I completely decimated this person, saying that you're not even fit to call yourself an activist. You're not fit to be researching on issues of child abuse. Are completely unfit. And I think my sorrow later on was that it didn't leave him with any kind of resources. I mean, he was so overwhelmed with shame that it wasn't helpful for him to take responsibility for what he may have been doing or what he had done with any responsibility. He was so it had become into another victim oppressor game. Yeah.
Kind of perpetuating.
Yeah. And I see how underlying the monster is often the victim who is now morphed into this monster, which is blind and deaf and unforgiving. While at one level I agree that when I'm caught in that dark space where this monster is really alive and lashing out and breathing fire, it becomes very difficult for anybody else to sort of touch this monster. But I think one of the ways I feel what this monster could be looking for is to engage with other people who also own up their own monsters within. Yeah. But not necessarily in a very, it's not it's like a volcano. You cannot engage with it when it is alive and it's erupting. But when it's dormant and it's calmer, that's the time to engage with this monster to really see what is the nature of rage. And I think that a large part of my work with the victim identity comes from there.
I resonate with that bit about in those moments of rage, or periods of rage, if not moments, being this being completely unforgiving. Yeah. Um, Almost like nothing seems to kind of soothe, touch, um, um, or bring any kind of compassion or any kind of softness, right? Um, Yeah, it feels like a urge to sort of wreck vengeance. You know, do unto others what you feel has been done unto you. Um, yeah.
So, Dilip, I was curious that these three mails, hate mails that you received, I'm assuming that these were not private mails or private messages, and this was happening in a group space. And my question that I've always battled with, uh, today I engage with it far more curiosity than accusation, is what is happening to the 100 other people who are observers of that same. So the battle is between you and these three people, but what's the role of the bystanders over there? Are they just mute spectators, observers, silent supporters?
Like
Who are they?
like in most of these groups, there are 50 members in this group. It's a class group. Uh, 30, 32, 34 are silent members, or they will communicate when there is a school reunion happening or something like that. There are about 15 fairly uh, active members. Out of that 15, probably about 8 are fairly active. And I stand alone. Okay. This is an international group. All of them are Westerners living in the West. And they may be, Sri Lankan and Indian, Bengali. I'm the only one in the group living not in the West. Uh, and 3 lashed out. And it becomes, it becomes like a chain reaction. That ganging up, the delinquent juvenile ganging up, which happened in school, it's now happening. And we are in a mid to late 60s, Roop. So you see the disgust, the contempt that I feel for this. And then happening on Christmas, you criticize me for using that as a metaphor of World War I and connecting it with what's happening in the world today. And you are ganging up on Christmas. Those soldiers were under command, yet they made a decision to lay down arms. Here, this is an online group. You have choice. We are graduates of one of the best schools in the world back in the 60s. You have the choice on how to, respond, and you gang up. I mean, the disgust that I feel at how they have responded. I've been called conspiracy theorist. I've been accused of disinformation. And if you check my post, I will give at least 4 or 5 links to articles or videos. Whereas all the other people will give long, highly opinionated stuff on, vaccine, COVID, this, that. I will always give links and write a few lines. Still, I'm accused of disinformation. So, I have no words to describe the disgust I feel. Really, disgust is such a mild word that, to what I really feel in this situation. And yeah, again, helplessness is how do I respond? Because I'm not going to be quiet. But neither do I want to, like Snigdha said at the beginning, you don't want to lash out. If they were physically here, yes, I might have, but you don't really want to lash out with violence. So how to contain that violence and not let that affect you, but sublimate it, channelize it, like with the knife in the block of wood. Before I would go to the potter's wheel and work with clay. Now words are the only medium, and especially when you're in the virtual reality, words and images. And Ahmed used the word providential. This happened yesterday, and this morning when I checked a mail, I came across a cartoon which was so appropriate and which I've already posted. It's a cartoon of 2 rats. Title is In the Labs. One rat is asking the other, are you going to take the vaccination? And the other one says, are you crazy? Let them finish with the human tests. Okay, I found that so appropriate. I just posted that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
Dilip, so much evoked in so many ways when you shared that. One is I felt for a moment really a kind of sadness, at the suffering kind of conveyed, yeah. And overall, it's not only generally there,
that's why the tears yesterday.
and yeah. And the other feeling I had, I don't know if this makes sense to you. Not that's the feeling I get is one of being kind of almost being raped. Okay, I use a strong word because you use very strong kind of emotions and languages also. That's why I allow myself to kind of go on and share that, right? A feeling of being raped
Yes,
almost by
absolutely.
these people. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the word I have used often, and I have been raped in my life, not physically, thank God, not sexually, thank God, but yes. And in this very forum, we've been interacting for 9 years, 9 years, 9.5 years now. And the very same thing happened 5 years ago. And at that point, there was one white guy, an Australian, who finally had enough and he spoke up. This time, nobody is going to. I came across another image today. These images, they are so helpful to me because my emails are a combination of words and images. There's that famous image, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with it, during the Nazi era, where everybody in the crowd was up with, saying Heil Hitler, and there was one chap who refused to. And I was just thinking of that again. I mean, did that chap feel alienated in that situation? I wonder. Because I'm not feeling alienated. I'm feeling strong. But it is difficult to be that one person. It's very difficult. The whistleblowers. I've been reading, in the last 2 days, I've been reading about whistleblowers. Today, though, nearly the whole day I was listening to various whistleblowers. Doctors, nurses, whose careers have been destroyed by these psychopaths, by mainstream media, who stood up and spoken regarding this whole COVID scam. Which is what they're doing to me in this group, in their own way. They're trying to just destroy me, to silence me. One person actually said, mute him. And that same person who said that yesterday said this 5 years ago. She shrieked and said, I mean, you can feel the shriek in a written communication, She said, do not read his emails. Delete them as soon as they come into your inbox. The standard solution of annihilate, silence. So disgusting, so Western.
I'm going to have to drop off because my family is sort of waiting for dinner. Actually, feeling quite.
Some closing thoughts?
No, but I think the three of you should continue and see where it logically ends if you'd like to.
I have another. We had appointed 1 hour, or is it 1.5 hours? 7 to 8, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I have about another 5-6 minutes. Yeah.
Let's close it off with some concluding thoughts. I agree with Dalip as well. I'm not sure whether any, at least internally for me, whether there is a conclusion that I'm, working towards. But yeah, it would be okay. It would be nice to just sort of
Rounding
what.
off thoughts.
Yeah.
That
I'm yeah.
that wonderful
I,
smile.
I prefer, Dilip, I prefer the rounding off rather than closing, because I don't think that even when we get off this conversation actively, I know that in my mind, so to just continue playing for some time, and I'd like for that. So I don't want to do closing remarks. I want to do rounding off remarks.
You were saying something, Ahmed? Sorry.
Yeah. I'm drawn very much to after this wonderful explanation to the idea of darkness. Okay, uh, and I don't just mean darkness in a depressive sense, which is kind of more tends to be more sort of emotional, has an emotional quality to it. But I'm kind of now feeling that kind of there is this feeling of that I've kind of touched a kind of a more existential darkness of almost, and I'm using the word existential kind of quite consciously, okay, not loosely, almost like for me it brings up this feeling of kind of this of being alone in a kind of a possibly hostile or uncaring universe, okay, and not knowing what the hell I'm doing here, I mean darkness of that kind. And why, what is happening and why is it happening, and and then all that wells up is kind of this, somebody also mentioned blind rage, all that kind of wells up in the terror, in the face of that, the terror that comes up is just rage which wants to almost like shift under, wants to annihilate. So for me this whole the I mean I somehow like to call it darkness. I don't know why, but it's also about being in the dark, about people, about the world, what happens here, and you know what kind of a place is this? Being in dark about all that, obviously about who I am also, but what is kind of place is this? Why am I here? What the hell am I doing? Why is all this happening to me?
Drop the why and just see the second
No,
part of
no, no. It's not a. It's
I
not
am doing.
a.
It doesn't
Meaning,
matter
not a.
what.
It's not a question to for answers.
As
Not
much
question
as
seeking answers here.
I think I'm really what I'm taking away from this conversation are two things. I think one, Ahmed, what you offered was very meaningful in terms of um, rage being anger with terror. Yeah. Um, and the second, what Dalip you've shared, and what Snigdha you shared, I'm in touch with that monster, and what I'm going to do for myself is to try and what Dilip you said, which is very meaningful, is try to draw the monster, yeah, and see what colors it assumes, what shape or form it assumes, and I'll take a picture and I'll share it with all of you guys.
Wonderful.
And, and I think I'm going to try and uh, ask and listen to the monster.
Wonderful.
These questions that Ahmed you said was what is this, ये वो क्या कहते हैं, ये क्या जगह है दोस्तों,
हाँ, ये कौन सा दयार है?
ये कौन सा दयार है? So this is a question I think I want to
Wonderful.
hear
Yeah.
the monster. What is it?
ड्रॉ करेगा ना रूप या नहीं? हाँ, ड्रॉ
Yeah,
करेगा.
I'll try. I mean, of course, I'm I don't know what kind of drawing is it going to be, but जो भी होगा वो होगा.
Chalo, theek hai, Roop. We won't judge you on your drawing skills.
I don't think the monster gives a fig.
I sensed you were looking for some sort of, what's that called? It's not endorsement, not
So in his
approval.
group, I suddenly realized, when I was saying that, the person I think this monster would like a little validation from, or maybe not validation, just a little cuddling from, is Dalip. Yeah, but the artist हो ना तुम, वैसे तो बाकी और ये भी आर्टिस्ट ही है,
अब बाकी
but
सब लोग आर्टिस्ट नहीं है, ये तय तय कर दिया तुमने, तय कर दिया बाकी लोग आर्टिस्ट नहीं है।
क्लासी आर्टिस्ट है, वो पॉटर है और वो उसमें खासियत है, sort of. At least that's what I'm drawn towards. So I'm just kidding.
Well, my rounding of thoughts. One of the hate mails ended with something to the effect of, he was throwing figures of the usual figures of 1.65 million people have died, blah, 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 which is all BS. He says, if you want to create a fantasy reality, why don't you write a novel? And I'm sure it'll do very well. And that is the opening that I was looking for, because since about 10 weeks, I've been thinking, Dalip, it's time to now really withdraw from this forum. Not leave, but withdraw. Okay? I have been the most active of the whole lot. And I was looking for an opportunity. And this 2 lines has given me that opportunity. I've already started penning down some thoughts, and I even have a title. The title is A Night in White Satin. Okay? Connected to that song, which I love.
That's the moody blues.
And it's going to be monstrous, because there are going to be some really gruesome images in it. Maybe I will share that with you all. I don't know. But I have already started on that. And I think before the end of Jan, I should have a sketch which I will post on the forum and thank the classmate who had set up the forum and say goodbye. I need to get on. 10 years has been a long time. It's been quite a journey.
I'm just quite charged with this conversation. I think I'll have a conversation with my rage.
Super. So on that note, a ragey goodbye.
Raging goodbye. Wish you all a very happy new year, and see you all in 2 weeks'
Yes.
time.
Same to you. Dalip, where do you stay?
Off NIBM Road. Pune.
Sorry?
Pune.
Oh, so you guys are from Pune. All right. Okay.
So,
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.